Appreciate it. Okay, so today, as I said to Trace earlier, it's one of my favorite topics because, first of all, we're unaware of our body language and our nonverbal communication, and we're unaware of whether somebody who is actually speaking to us is aware of verbal or nonverbal communication. So it's quite an interesting subject in terms of it's not only whether the other person knows, it's whether you know how you're behaving so that you can actually put a different message across. So I'm going to share my slides, and once again, as I started, the previous week, so I'm going to start this week as well. Okay. So empowering your habits is, once again, there's two factors to empowering your habits. And the first one is awareness, and the second one is practice. And it takes practice before it comes to you naturally. So once again, awareness is knowledge or perception of the situational fact, and practice involves doing something regularly in order to improve your ability at it. Once again, I'm going to reiterate being in the moment, because that for me is huge. And once again, we miss the verbal cues, the non-verbal cues, when we are not in the moment. So the past is what was. The only thing we can do with the past is learn from it. The future is what will be. The only thing we can be certain of that is that it hasn't yet happened. The only place that we can live is in the now, the present. It's a gift. Remember that. Okay, so we're doing types of body language and eye contact, which in other words is non-verbal communication. So non-verbal communication is our body language and everything we communicate besides the spoken word. So posture, gestures, dress, appearance, facial expressions, and the like. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit before I go through these slides, and it isn't one size fits all, and I need you to be very, very aware of that, because we are different human beings and we all have different ways of reacting. And it's also very important to establish whether somebody is right-brained or left-brained, particularly when you're doing verbal or non-verbal communication. So why that's important, and also whether they're female or male. So the male body language doesn't necessarily fit the female body language. So I'm going to go through a little bit of that, but also be aware of finding out whether the person, so if I say to you, when a person looks left, they're doing X, Y, Z, you must first have established whether that is the dominant or the non-dominant. And how we can do that, and I'll go through that a little bit just now. So some common gestures, which we're very unconscious about, is if somebody's sitting in front of you biting their nails, it means that they're insecure. Okay. If somebody is turning away, they generally are in disbelief of what you are saying. Somebody is pulling at their ears, it generally would mean that they are making a decision. If somebody's got their hand on their cheek, they generally are thinking. And if somebody's drumming their fingernails against the desk or something like fidgeting, it's usually that they're being impatient. So I said to you guys, I'm going to give you the absolute way you can find out if somebody is lying to you. Very often, people touch their nose when they are in doubt or are lying to you. And if you think about Pinocchio and the nose, you all know the story of Pinocchio, that every time he lied, his nose grew. So it's very much similar to that. So be aware of what people are doing with their hands while they are speaking to you. Okay. So universal facial expressions. I really enjoy this. So obviously when somebody is happy, okay, they generally are going to smile. Now, in order to see if somebody's smile is genuine, they would generally get crow's feet on the side of their face, unless obviously they've had Botox, then it's a bit problematic. Anger, somebody will frown and their eyes will narrow. With fear, their eyes widen up and they raise their eyebrows. Surprise, they fully raise their eyebrows and generally their mouth is open. So be aware of that. Sadness, their mouth actually turns down and they've got a slight frown. So disgust would be the nose wrinkle, the lips apart, and the narrowing of the eyes. So it would be something similar to what I'm showing you right now. It's kind of difficult to do this on Zoom. It's a lot easier to practice it with somebody one-on-one. So that's going to be your task for the week, is to actually go and practice all of these non-verbal communications and to actually notice them on other people. Okay, so head positioning. So what's interesting about the head positioning, all right, and the movement of the head. So when somebody is nodding, they are in agreement. So they would generally be nodding, okay? And I think I spoke to you, I think it was week 1 or 2, is be aware of when somebody is saying yes, okay? Because they're actually not meaning yes. Their body language is saying they're absolutely saying no, okay? Now, also be aware that when somebody is nodding fast, when you're speaking to them, they generally are impatient and they're wanting you to get to the point. So a nod of agreement is great, but when somebody is nodding like this, they're going, you know, move up the conversation, get to your point. Okay, so head up, if somebody was listening to you, they would be listening to you without bias. Head down, they would be disinterested and obviously rejection. So tilted to the side, if you are speaking to somebody, you're being thoughtful when you tilt your head to the side. And it's also a manner in which you're creating trust with the other human being that you are communicating with. So you'll notice when somebody is in a meeting and they're wanting you to actually buy into something, they'll actually lean their head to the side, hoping that you will pick up on that body language. Okay, head high is confidence. Chin up, generally looking down their nose, defiance. Okay, head forward is interest. And tilted down is disapproval. Okay, and then shaking, obviously left to right, is disagreement. Okay, there's a slide I wanted to show you guys. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and just go and find that particular slide, because it was one that I wanted to share with you particularly, because I spoke about. Okay. All right. So this is, that doesn't help. I need to share. Apologies for that delay. Okay. So our minds work in 2 ways. And it's only possible for, and if you think about it, it's actually quite logical. Our mind is either recalling, okay, or alternatively, it is creating. So we are working with 2 elements only when it comes to how the mind works. So we either are trying to recall an incident or we are creating an incident. And that kind of goes back to a little bit to remembering and lying, okay? But if we look at a creative person, it's not necessarily lying, it's imagination. So recalling would be past memories, creating would be using our imagination, and not only just for lying. but to create a story. Okay, and then I wanted to go into the difference between females and males. Okay, so if you are speaking to a female, okay, I particularly want you to notice one thing when you're speaking to somebody, and I'm not only talking in the business environment, I'm talking in the social environment, is where either male or female is directing their attention, which is also generally where their feet is pointing. That's where their interests are. And it can also be a romantic interest. So just particularly look out for things like that. So if somebody is attracted to you romantically or for your mind or that kind of thing, generally their feet will be pointing in the direction of where you are sitting, and vice versa. So I want you to be aware of where you're putting your feet when you're having a meeting. Okay, so body position and posture for a female. Generally, females have very closed body language. I suppose it's also historical that women want to make themselves smaller. And I know that it's definitely a changing world. However, this is generally how a woman would start off in a situation with somebody that she doesn't know, is with very closed body language. Okay, leaning. If they are leaning forward, they're interested. If they're leaning backwards, they are then displeased by what you are saying, or they are feeling uncomfortable about what you are saying. Okay, women definitely smile way more than men, and that's a fact. And it's a way of us, it's part of our nurturing nature, is to get somebody to relate to us. That's why we smile so much more than men. Our eye contact, if we are maintaining eye contact, we're incredibly interested in what the person is saying. Okay. And mirroring. Okay. Yes, Brian, do you have a question? Brian.
Yeah, I've just unmuted. Can I ask you, Tracey, is that there's something that you just said now was about that definitely this is the way it is. And what I'm wondering is about the breadth of the human experience, that whether being in South Africa, where we have so many different cultures, I mean, we all know the classic one about the difference between Black culture and white culture, about lowering one's eyes and as a show of respect. So that becomes quite complex if one's dealing with, let's say, the Black community, the white community, the colored community, or perhaps even within those different communities, you've got people from different countries. And then also with men and women, with the entire change that there has been, there would be a distinction presumably between age groups, between those who are older and have been habituated in a certain way, and those who are younger and have lived in a different generation. So I'm just thinking about all of these variables, and so what the feeling is that drives the emotion and the approach, and therefore how that manifests completely differently within the body language. So I relate to all of these, and I was just wondering about, I mean, 20 years ago, it would have really resonated. But now with all of these different variables, age, gender, culture, how these apply exactly, how you would suggest they apply.
Okay, great question and great comments. And as I said to you in the beginning, it's not one size fits all anymore. And it is because of the cultures, and it is because of our upbringing and all of that kind of thing. The female and the male energies, and you'll see when I do the male one, you'll relate to it so well, because this, I would say, this is probably about, and I don't know the exact facts, 85% accurate. But if you're going to say to somebody that they are disinterested in you because they're not maintaining eye contact, for example, there must be a substantiation. So yes, when communicating with somebody, it is vitally important to first establish what their background is before you start judging their body language. But there's a little baby telltale signs that I think have come through the ages that will stay the same. In terms of the smiling for females, definitely. You'll notice it after this presentation. You will notice it hands down that women smile more than men do, and that hasn't changed. So yes, establishing a baseline is absolutely vital in the beginning before you start judging anybody's body language and nonverbal communication. And yes, culture and age and all of that kind of stuff, upbringing, all of that kind of thing does come into it. Whether the person's left brain, right brained also comes into it hugely, because you'll see when I go into the eye contact, we talk about definitely left, definitely right, but that's not necessarily true unless you've established it. Philip, you had something to say. Unmute.
That would help. I'm looking at these slides, and you're listening to your comments, and I'm thinking to myself, one of the last situations I had with my previous contract client, and it was an incident with one of their employees, and the man is about 11 years younger than me, but he wants to wield authorities and give me a rap over for what he perceives as, let's call it, for want of a better term, unprofessional conduct. But he doesn't look at you straight in the eye or confront you directly. He starts talking to you, saying, by looking at the floor, and then with a bent posture, almost like a hunchback, but very mild, going a little bit further down, and then slowly and very gradually turning his head towards me, giving this profile kind of adjustment of the neck. And then he stands up and finishes the load down. How would you assess that from what you said now?
Okay, so if we're looking at that situation, how much of that situation is true in terms of your misconduct?
Absolutely zero.
Okay, so my first thing is that the guy doubts himself completely because of the head down, okay, and not being able to look at you in the face. So he is using his imagination, okay, the creative mind. Right. So he's creating things as he's talking. All right. The looking up and to the side is complete doubt. I would read that straight away from that person, whether they knew body language or not. But somebody who cannot, especially somebody who is calling you out on something, if they cannot, at least for a certain amount of time, maintain eye contact with you, they are completely insecure within themselves, and they are not actually sure that what they are saying is actually true.
That makes sense. That's exactly the assessment that I made without all. Thank you.
And Philip, subconsciously we read body language. It's fascinating. We don't have to know this stuff out of a book or out of a presentation or a Zoom session. We know it. We can actually feel it. It's something that we pick up and we go, I'm not comfortable with that situation or the way that that person is. But we can't say, oh, they did this and they did that and they did that. We just are uncomfortable.
So what really scares me about what you've said so far, including your last comment, is the fact that this particular gentleman, prior to joining my client's organization, say, what, we're 21 now, so probably about mid 2018, was that he was a high school principal. And I'm thinking to myself, how did he actually run the school?
Yeah.
And
And
it just doesn't make sense.
And it comes back down to ego. Okay. Somebody, and I mentioned this in previous talks, somebody that's got a big ego has a very low self-esteem. So somebody who's like boasting about themselves continuously and being malicious generally has a low self-esteem of themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. So I'm going to talk about mirroring a little bit later, but females generally mirror often, much more often than men. In fact, men only mirror females, which is interesting. And I'll go into that when I go into mirroring and how we copy somebody's behavior that's sitting in front of us. Okay. And I spoke about this, legs and feet point in the direction of interest. So when you're in a one-on-one meeting, have a look at where the person's feet are pointing, especially if you're in a meeting with numerous people. Who's the person that they're giving the most attention to, and they respect the most? That's the direction of the feet that they will generally, the direction of their feet will generally tell you that.
Just explain that a bit more, please.
Okay, so if you're sitting in a round robin meeting,
yeah,
okay, and generally without a desk is where you can see it,
yeah.
And you'll see that. So now you've called the meeting, Philip,
right.
But the CEO of the company that this person is employed with is also in the meeting. If you have a look at that person's feet, 9 times out of 10. They will be pointing in the CEO's direction because that's who they need to impress.
Okay. So, but now if your feet are pointing upwards or your legs are crossed or something like that?
Oh, that's a very different, so the legs crossed is closing off. I actually didn't bring that into the presentation at all. So yeah, your legs crossed or your arms crossed, and I thought that was pretty standard. People want you out of their space. So if you're talking to somebody, especially about their personal life, when they start to feel uncomfortable, you'll see they'll start crossing their arms. Or if they no longer want you to engage with them, they cross their arms. And then you can call people out on it, and generally they'll say, oh, but that's how I'm comfortable. But if we actually dig down a little bit further, we can actually get to the fact that they were disinterested at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Women will touch far more than men will. And tapping. So when a woman taps, she's annoyed or she's uncomfortable. She wants to get out of the situation. Okay. So males. All right. So males will generally have a wider stance, and they're wanting to increase their size, which is interesting. Charlene, yes.
I don't know what I've done here. Many videos as you want. Sorry. Okay. Following on from what you said about the closed arms, what is then a closed body posture?
So a closed body posture would be your arms crossed or your legs crossed, especially when you are engaging with somebody else.
So then how's that different from disengaging when you said if you fold your arms?
Just repeat your question again.
So if I understood correctly, you said if somebody crosses their arms like that.
Yes.
Which to me is a closed body posture, which you said yes. Women do because of.
Okay, but if you, yeah, they want to look smaller. So women will generally.
What about smaller?
So I like the way you think. So
what's the difference between that and the posture that shows disinterest?
Okay, so a closed body posture in terms of a female would be their shoulders are slightly in, okay, and they generally will sit you know how women sit very often, I don't know if I'm getting this right here, we'll sit with our hands crossed like this.
Wait,
I don't know if you've noticed it.
I've lost the view. Oh,
Okay, can you see me?
yeah.
So a lot of women sit with their hands like this. All right. So that's, I'm not quite closed as this. Okay. But I'm not letting you in yet.
Okay.
Okay.
So does it make right over left or left over right?
It doesn't make any difference. What's interesting is that with a female and their first sort of meeting with you, their closed body posture is further away from their body than when they're annoyed with you. When somebody's annoyed with you, their closed posture is very close to their body. Does that make sense?
So, hang on. Just a question on that. If you're sitting with your left hand over just your left palm over your right hand, or vice versa, is that like maybe a precursor to folding the arms, or where you're heading with that?
It could be. It could be. So generally we start crossing small things, and it could be your legs. It could be, you know, so it's little things that make us actually withdraw and almost create that barrier between the person that we're speaking to. So you'll find that when you speak to somebody and you're becoming friends with them, okay, and you're having a great conversation, the more open they become with their shoulders as well. So closed body posture, your shoulders are in. Open body posture, your shoulders are out. So it's little baby telltale signs. And what I want you to do is I want you to recognize it within yourself first. Because when you can recognize...
Sorry.
But,
I'm objecting to the nose thing that you said, rubbing the nose shows dishonesty or disbelief. That's where you have to establish a baseline, because I very often rub my nose, but I've got allergies.
Once again, a baseline is important there. But once again, if you take all of these, okay, so the head tilting and all of that, and the rubbing of the nose, and I'm going to show you an eye movement that can also possibly indicate that somebody is being deceitful. If you can take all of those into account and then make a judgment call from there. Does that make sense, Charlene?
I just thought I had to get that point in.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay. So men will generally puff out their chest, especially on a first meeting, shoulders back, and they will increase their size. They want to come across as bigger and more confident. Okay. Guys will only smile when they're absolutely happy or they're engaging in someone's interests. So, as I said, a woman will smile all the time. A guy will only smile when he's happy or he is engaged in someone's interest. Okay. Eye contact with a male generally is to dominate. And when I go through the eye contact and the eye movement a little bit later, you'll see where that comes in. Okay. And a guy will only mirror a female. A guy will never mirror another male. And I'm not sure why that is, but if I had to have a guess, it would be an ego thing. Okay. And once again, the legs pointed in a certain direction, and that's the direction of their interest. And
a politically incorrect question. If you say eye contact with male to male is not very common, could it indicate any sexual deviations?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go and do some research on that, Charlene, and come back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then guys fidget way more than girls. So if you're seeing a girl fidget, she's getting like to the point where she wants to move on. Okay. Guys will just fidget. And I think it's because there's and also not a PC statement. Guys suffer more from ADHD than girls do. Just a joke, Philip. Excuse
This
me.
could be an indication with young children that the fidgeting is not just disinterest in the lesson in class. It could be an indication to look further.
Absolutely, but there's quite a few indications, and if we go into the ADHD, that's a whole different kettle of fish, because there is a whole study on the go at the moment in terms of people that are diagnosed with depression that are actually suffering from ADHD. And it's a fascinating study that I'm busy following at the moment, is that because of, I know when I was younger and parents were all upset about the teachers saying that their kids had to go onto Ritalin. So the teachers stopped saying the kids have to go onto Ritalin. Then the kids get a bit older and they go to their GP because they're not coping with life. And the GP goes, okay, because you're depressed. And they put them on antidepressants. And that ADHD just gets misdiagnosed. So that's quite interesting in terms of the kids and learning their behaviors and that kind of stuff.
And any new research on autism and lack of eye contact, but that is a particular symptom associated with that condition.
Yes, definitely. That is 100% a symptom of autism. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So mirroring, it's one of my favorite things to do with people. And it's fascinating to watch how people react to you mirroring. And as I said to you, males do not mirror other males, but they do mirror females. Okay, so obviously the smile is the most common. So you'll smile when the other person smiles. Height. Okay, some people mirror the height by stooping or stretching. So if you're with somebody who's very, very tall, you will generally stretch out your body. If you're with somebody who's a lot shorter, you'll watch your body language. Okay, you'll do whatever they are, which is quite interesting. Oops. Okay, and then copies of gestures. So if somebody would sort of move their hands in a certain way, you would also then move your hands in a certain way. Ah, lost you. Okay. All right, speech. And this is one that we do completely unconsciously, is that we mirror somebody's pitch, tone, and rhythm when we're speaking to them. So if, for example, I was speaking to you as though you were a 2-year-old and I started speaking slowly, then 9 times out of 10, the person that I'm mirroring will then also start speaking very slowly and in a disdained sort of pitch. One of the biggest ways to create a bond with a person is to match their breathing rates. And this is one way of creating trust. So it's actually quite interesting is when you start breathing the same way as the person sitting opposite you, you start to create that bond with that person without even knowing about it. It also is a fabulous way of creating trust amongst people. Okay. All right, so I did speak about the mind is recalling or it's creating. Okay, so before we go on to eyes, which is my favorite part, I wanted to know if anybody had any other questions.
I'm just become interested in what you're saying in the body language of deaf people who are non-verbal and use sign language. Any information on that?
I haven't done much research in terms of that, but actually quite an interesting subject. I would definitely want to look into something like that.
I'm keeping you busy, sorry.
No, not at all. It's perfect. Philip, you got something to say?
Another question, and it's one that's actually kind of current because I'm in a block of flats at sectional top, and we're having a problem with our chairperson who's what's the term they call it? There's a term for it. I can't remember offhand now. She's under psychiatric treatment. She's on heavy medication, but at the same time, she's a kind of person who's very aggressive, very defensive, and whenever you talk to her, she never sits straight in her chair. Or if you watch a Zoom meeting with her, even in real life, she's always slouching, and you never really know. I've sat in umpteen meetings with this woman because I used to be a trustee, and I know that in a week's time we've got a special GM because of her and the kind of things that she's doing, and just she's the defensiveness and in that she screams. She doesn't talk. She's really angst. Like there's something she's got to hide, and I don't know how to make her out.
Once again, that's ego, but I think that's a general, if you're a trustee on any sectional title, then you need to have an ego and you need to bring it out at meetings.
No, she's been, no, the problem there is that, okay, I don't want to go into too much detail, but she and the managing agent have a relationship that is closer than just a working relationship. They visit each other socially. She's got access to things that she shouldn't have access to for other reasons. And it's a whole plethora of mismanagement that's going on behind the scenes. But you can never get information out of her without her actually screaming at you, shouting at you, or going on the defensive.
Was she always like that?
Well, I've only known her 10 years. But apparently she's been in the position a lot longer than that. Unfortunately for the body corporate.
Yeah. Okay, but that's her general behavior for the last 10 years.
Generally, her demeanor.
Okay. All right. So
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what she's like in her private life. What goes on behind the door, closed doors. But that's whatever I've encountered with her and the other trustees.
Okay, so generally, somebody who is constantly on the defensive is constantly attacked as well. Okay, and once again, the insecurity and the doubt comes in. Are they doing the right thing? So there might be, if she had become more aggressive, okay, I would look at those instances. If her behavior for the last 10 years has been that she walks into a room and starts screaming and shouting, then she's number one, got some anger issues. And yes, you mentioned the possible mental issues. So if she was diagnosed with
bipolar.
Yeah, I was just going to say a bipolar person would definitely walk like that, behave like that. And what they do is with bipolar is that they're never actually sure whether they're in a manic high or a manic low or anything like that. So when they are faced with a group of people, okay, the natural instinct is to attack before they get attacked. Okay, they feel judged all the time, and it's possible that they, and because you see the label thing that we give, deaf, bipolar, depression, ADHD.
Not that we give that somebody, there's some other historical genealogist decided to label them.
Yeah, but however, there's a beautiful TED talk about a woman who didn't know, her parents decided not to tell her she was blind. And only on her 18th birthday did she go to the optometrist with her sister. And the optometrist said, "What did you get for your birthday?" And she said, "I got driving lesson." And the doctor kind of looked at the mother and said, "Does she not know she's blind?" And that's the first time she started falling over stuff. So, the labels that we are given by medical practitioners and all of that kind of stuff, or by teachers or by parents, are what we end up defining ourselves as. And very often we've got to fit into that mold.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like the old days school teachers that used to walk around telling you you're stupid because you couldn't grasp an idea or a concept at school.
It's the beliefs that we buy into, yes. And Ola's got a question: how can she drive if she's blind? Who asked it?
Remember that we were buying into those ideas at the time either.
Yeah. So Ola, I see you asked that question. How could she drive? She was legally blind, but she could see shapes and stuff like that. So her parents wanted her to have as a normal upbringing as possible. So even if she was going to be driving in a parking lot or something like that, or getting a driving lesson, the mind is incredibly powerful. As soon as you label it as I've got bipolar or I've got depression, insecurities start coming in, and then you've got to be more than what you actually set out to be. Hola! How are you?
Good. Hi, everyone. Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I mean, my current read right now, it's also talking about the mind, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, because it's actually very, very powerful. Like whatever it is that you just tell yourself that you are, it's like ultimately you're just the creator of yourself. So if you say you're blind, obviously you're going to start acting like a blind person. But if you tell yourself you can do it, you're gonna knock over a couple of times, and then you just start failing forward in doing it. Yeah, that was just interesting, because I was like, okay, she's blind and she can drive. Oh my God, I hope I'm not driving on the highway without.
Yeah, and I think overseas driving and disability awareness overseas is very different to what it is here in this country. So they would have complete assistive devices, which is interesting. But yeah, it's just strange how we get a label and then we've got to live up to that label. So we get diagnosed as bipolar, we've got to live up to the fact that we've got bipolar. And that everyone's going to judge us by that, whether they know or they don't know. We think the whole world does know.
True. And I think if you're telling yourself that as well, like you already been labeled as that, like your brain is a survival tool. So it's always going to look for validation and guarantee, because it doesn't want you to go insane thinking that you don't know what you're talking about. So if you say you're bipolar, then yeah, the universe will give you all the reasons to be bipolar.
Absolutely. And particularly, I know that we spoke about the blame game a couple of weeks ago with you. When you blame your disorder. So I did that because I had bipolar. It's an excuse. The minute you can blame a disorder, it's an excuse to get out of it. But it's our insecurities. It's the person who's got that diagnosis that is insecure and then does not know how to communicate without having this label. It's almost like their label is a neon signs above their head going, I'm bipolar. And they've got to prove that they're not, or that they are normal or accepted by society. And I'm still trying to find out who the society is.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Then we're going on to my next one. I'm just going to share that, which is my favorite. Okay, eyes. So our eyes are absolutely the windows to our soul. So one of the things that I spoke about is knowing whether a person is left-brained or right-brained. So are they creative or are they logical? And this is a factor that really comes in with the eyes and the judging of the non-verbal communication in this case. So when a person is looking down, they're self-communicating. So they're having a conversation with that word's not right. It just doesn't look right. They are actually having a conversation with themselves. So generally when somebody does look down in a conversation, they're actually having a conversation with themselves and deciding what their next move is going to be. So when somebody is looking up, it's very much a recall. They're trying to get their librarian in their brain to run through all of their past memories and recall something. Okay, when somebody is looking to the left, they are remembering. When they are looking to the right, they are guessing or lying. And once again, I'm going to say to you, you need to first establish a baseline. Are they left-brained? Are they right-brained? Okay. And how you can do this is ask a person a question such as, what did you have for supper last week, Wednesday? And have a look at which side their eyes are going. Now, this obviously won't work with somebody who has a menu that they will eat the same thing every single week on every day, because they'll know what they had on Wednesday. So you've got to come up with a more sort of interesting question where they've actually got to think back on a specific situation, and 9 times out of 10, they're not going to know the answer to it. So they're going to just make something up. And that's where you will establish whether they're left or right. And then you can start the conversation and start getting your answers from their eyes. Okay, so a sideways right is generally imagination, and a sideways left is generally memory. Okay, direct eye contact is sincerity and honesty. Okay, wide eyes is interest. Okay, rolled eyes is frustration. And frequent blinking is excitement. And then somebody who doesn't blink often is generally bored, or they're concentrating on what you are saying. Okay, so are there any comments on the eye slide that I've just gone through? No. Okay. All right, so I've come to the end of my presentation, and I only left 8 minutes, Trace, for any interactive chatting.
I absolutely love the slide on the eyes, and it is so interesting. As you were talking about it, I was sitting and thinking, okay, so if someone's speaking to me and they're looking right, which side is it? Is it that eye or that eye? So interesting and really important for us to be aware of when we speak to people. I see someone had a question before I started talking. I didn't manage to see who it was. Maybe Franz? Was it you, Franz?
Yeah, yes, it was me. So I just like to the speech and the tone part. It's one of the things I've identified, that I speak slowly, and then some people, they tend to be impatient about it, and then I end up talking, like trying to talk faster, and then I don't know if that problem can be solved or what.
Franz, I don't think there's anything wrong with talking slowly. 9 times out of 10, you'll get people to pay more attention if you talk slowly versus talking very fast. You know, if somebody is getting impatient with you in terms of talking slowly, then maybe you need to address their impatience, number one, or number two, possibly get to a point a little bit quicker. So instead of putting all the frills and everything else onto the story, is make your point and what it is that you actually want to communicate as your priority. Did that answer your question, Franz?
Okay, noted, yes.
Okay. Cool. Nothing else from anyone?
So Ariela's just put in the chat that she has to go, but thank you, Tracy, for a magnificent presentation. I think today was so relevant, and we have so much that we now need to be aware of. And as Tracey said, let us take our task for the week and notice not only our own nonverbal